why. Why is the U.S., the media, Western media in general, why is it so focused on China, and why is it so focused on China in this way? Like, what is the basis for all of this?
Well, I mean, take your pick. There are a lot of reasons why. There's ideological reasons why, political reasons why. I think, as a Marxist, you have to go, you can talk about the superstructure and the base, and you can go down to the material base economic level, right? China has, for the 72, almost 73 years that it's been under the CPC as the party in power, has been building a society based on the fulfillment of material needs and the fulfillment of people's desires for a better life, right? So that's been happening for the entire history of the PRC. But in the years of reform and opening up, since 1978, there has been an enormous increase in growth, right? Stunning increase in growth not seen since the early 20th century with the Soviet Union. There's a lot to talk about there, but in particular, the nature of China's opening up. It wasn't as simple, because there's been many countries that were previously somewhat, let's say, closed, that opened up to the West or to the world at large. Japan famously opened up not by its own choice. And China at first also was opened up not by its own choice, but by the occupation and colonial aggrandizement and enrichment by colonialism, feudalism, imperialism, so on. But in the modern history, this unprecedented growth came with its own rules that were written by China. China set the terms for its opening, set the terms for its introduction of foreign capital into its economy, right? It wasn't as simple as opening up the floodgates, letting everything and everyone in, and untrammeled commerce, untrammeled extraction of surplus value, untrammeled exploitation. It set boundaries, it set guidelines that would allow for, in the future, first of all, would allow for some protection of base rights, protection of base standard of living, and also would allow for the development of its own indigenous industries in the future, after that opening up happened, and after there was expertise and there was capital and there was some investment. Now we're reaching that inflection point. We have reached that inflection point several years ago, where indigenous industry, indigenous economic power has supplanted foreign capital as the driving force of China's development. And because of that, because there is now a very palpable threat to economic hegemony on the part of the wealthy capitalist countries, and not only is it a rival in economic terms, but it's a rival in ideological terms, because there has been a continuity of government, a continuity of ideology through the Communist Party, despite the fact that the Communist Party has gone through many different phases and changes in its theoretical outlook and its view of the material conditions, the particularities. That continuity has stayed there, and that creates economic challenges to the U.S.-led capitalist hegemony, ideological challenges, because the presentation of an alternative under the red banner, under the banner of socialism, banner of communism, is always going to be setting off even more alarm bells than anything else. But again, didn't necessarily have to be strictly because of communism, because we saw what happened with Japan in the 80s, what the U.S. does to a potential rival, attempts to beat it into submission, which it was to some degree able to do with Japan, to a rather large degree, but has so far been unable to do with China, although it is, of course, trying. So I mean, it's this dual kind of threat. It's not just that there is an economic alternative and an alternative for countries in terms of trade, where they don't have to abide by certain political and economic requirements for trade relationships. They don't have to privatize their economies. They don't have to rob the public coffers in order to fund financing from supranational bodies like the IMF or World Bank, or bilaterally. And there is a growing understanding that there is more than one way of doing things. And so any challenge to that extractive process, any challenge to that draining of surplus value from the imperial periphery toward the core, which happens in many different ways, and we can talk about that for hours, but any circuit breaker of that process, any potential circuit breaker of that process, is not to be countenanced or abided. And so this is why, of course, people will say there's political motivations, there are these like little myriad motivations, but really what it comes down to is this somewhat inevitable trend of creation of blocks, of creation of groups of nations. As Lenin said back in the early 20th century, he predicted this exact thing when he wrote Imperialism at the beginning of the 20th century, over 100 years ago, and it's still true, it's still correct. And Mao Zedong talked about it as well. Like these people were not wrong, and we're seeing the expression, the reality of these theories taking place now as these blocks are forming, as there are patterns of behavior that create these antagonisms. They have their roots in this desire for economic domination, which has its intricacies and its vagaries, but that is the bottom line. And so that's what I think the motivation is. So I will stop monologuing.
Oh, it was great. I want to get your opinion, Jing, because, I would love to know what you think about why this is happening. I don't know, from you, from your colleagues. I guess what's the conclusion here? Like, why is China the subject of all of these attacks, in your opinion?
I think China is the subject probably because China is now a rising power that indeed threatening this novel that Western countries or United States is writing about itself. It's China now. It could be other country, if other country is the rising economy that poses as a threat to the United States. I mean, Western countries always accuse their enemy countries as doing propaganda, right? China is doing propaganda, Russia is doing propaganda, Iran doing propaganda. All these countries on the enemy list is doing propaganda. But if you really look at it, the master of propaganda is actually the United States. Because most people are programmed to hate communism or hate anything that these countries do. And you will, media or anyone say any ridiculous things that this country do, people will believe it. If you say any ridiculous things that North Koreans are doing, people believe it. Why? You have to think why. People are programmed to hate these things. I think I watched some Vox Pop. Like, I think most people cannot even point where North Korea is, where China is on a map. They don't know where you are. They don't know what your real culture is. They don't know who you are, but I know I hate you. This mindset is weird. So, before I was doing a lot of politics now, but when I graduated, started my career, second year of my career, I was doing cultural news because I'm like, I don't want to do politics because I just want to be like doing light-hearted things to be happy, because politics is really heavy. But then I decided to be more active on different platforms to really debunk all those lies, because all these lies, misconceptions, disinformation is piling up all these years. And as a Chinese who has been reading all this news all the time from Western media, like I couldn't take it anymore. I remember I was studying journalism in the UK when I was in journalism school. When I read all this news on BBC, I was like, okay. I was upset, but I didn't triggered me enough to really call it out. But all these years, I see all this misinformation, all these lies building up. It's like, okay, now I'm a Chinese, I'm in China, and I happen to be a journalist that I can actually go to these places, bring different voices in. And my English is not perfect, but I can communicate with English speaking people. So let me tell my stories to you guys, not just let some people with filters with this biases to tell my stories. I can tell you about my culture, my country. But then you would think that your country, your culture is being mentioned by this media all the time. You would think they are willing to hear you, but no, your opinion does not in line with their narratives. So they just label you, discredit you. This is very dangerous. I think I hope to bring more of these stories and more the voices here to more audiences in the West, because West media don't show that. So I just hope to bring different sides of these opinions to people. And I'm wondering, can I share screens as well, Danny?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's that option.
So like China is now the rising country. So as it rises, being you see that like more people come to China as well. So more voices from China, like mine, like Ian's, like yours, are telling the stories. So it really making all these narratives collapsing. Their China bad narrative collapsing, and China, more countries from the global South is uniting, and then like for example the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. So I will talk about this in our webinar last weekend as well. So United States sometimes is like your jealous neighbor. When he sees you build a swimming pool in your yard, he's very jealous. But instead of building his own, he decided to take a dump in yours. So what he's really doing to trying to, well, you guys are playing together? No, let me do something. Let me talk badmouth you behind you. So I have some screenshots. So to make China look bad, how do I do it? Let me see. Sorry, this is the first time to use this share screens on StreamYard.
There should be on the bottom a share
screen.
feature.
My whole desktop will be shared, right?
I think you can choose if it's like yeah, it depends on what it is.
Damn, oh, there's so many securities. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, taking a really long time. There's a firewall.
Yeah, while you're waiting, everyone, make sure you're just liking the stream. Make sure you're sharing it, all that good stuff. Subscribing to the channel.
You still can see that, right?
Nothing's popped up yet.
Chrome prohibited. Trying to protect my security. Oh, okay, but I can maybe later you can add it on the video or something. So this is a bill. It's the United States passed a bill of this Strategic Competition Act of 2021. So
hold on, Jing, is it a link or is it like a pic? Like what did you want to share? Because you could also just, if it's a link, you can send it in the private chat, and I could.
Okay, I got a picture though.
Oh, okay.
Screenshot. Okay, picture. But I can also show you my Chrome. I can show you a link here. The news, the story on the Herald, the Zimbabwe newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll put that up when you're talking about it.
Okay, so this is it. And also got some screenshot of this bill passed by the Senate. It's, I can read it. This is for countering Chinese influence fund. You heard about that, right? So countering Chinese influence fund, there's authorized to be appropriated $300 million for each of fiscal years 2022 through 2026 for the countering Chinese influence fund to counter the malign influence of the Chinese Communist Party globally. Amounts appropriated pursuant to these authorizations are authorized to remain available until expended and shall be in addition to amounts otherwise authorized to be appropriated to counter such influence. Okay, so I wanted to share these screenshots. So what this fund do? Where does this money go? So one portion of this money goes to support for local media. The Secretary of State, acting through an Assistant Secretary of the State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, in coordination with the administration of the United States Agency for International Development, shall support and train journalists on investigative techniques necessary to ensure public accountability related to the Belt and Road Initiative. They name it. So this fund goes to support local media in different countries to say bad things about Belt and Road Initiative. And I just shared you this link of this newspaper, The Herald from Zimbabwe. So the title, U.S. plans to discredit Chinese investment unmasked. So the local journalists find that the United States is sponsoring a strategy to undermine Chinese investments in Zimbabwe by smearing Chinese companies are engaging in widespread labor malpractices as well as a violation of human, community, and environmental rights, among others. They also organize some protests. So that's why all the negative news, that's one of the reasons all the negative news, all the bad things you heard about China, because they are directly funded by the United States government. The media are trained to write bad things about China. They are trained to organize protests, color revolutions. So that's why I said in the beginning that who is the master of the propaganda?
Yeah.
The United States.